All right. My name is Harry Fisher. I'm the chair of the Board of Estimate. This is a special meeting of the Board of Estimate and Taxation on Wednesday, January 22nd, calling to order at 5:15 p.m. If you would all rise and join with me in Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. First item of new business is a discussion and possible vote on strategic government resources, otherwise known as SGR, which, for the benefit of the public, was the firm engaged by the town for a search for a new comptroller for the that reports to the Board of Estimate and Taxation. I guess at this point I'll recognize Ms. Vasiliotis, who's been leading this.
Well, I'm not leading it. I'm one of four individuals who asked for this special meeting, so thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to begin by reviewing how we got to our meeting today. At some point last year, Mr. Fisher appointed an internal search committee, which happens to be the Budget Committee. And while technically the chair can appoint committees behind closed doors, this has not been the past practice of the BET. The search committee then identified a specific search firm the morning of the December 18th BET meeting and added a request for funds to our agenda of that meeting. And this body then approved $32,000, again, for a specific search firm that was discussed but never identified. We subsequently got that proposal on November 26th. The board was assured at our November meeting that if the search firm does not seem, can you please, I'm hearing noise and I'm speaking. The search
There was
firm,
some confusion on the agenda. I just want to confirm that I have the right agenda.
I'm reviewing how we got to our meeting today. I said that from the beginning. The board was assured at our November meeting that if the search firm doesn't seem it can adequately supply what the town needs, the representation at that meeting was made that we have a special meeting, and I quote, "We have a special meeting because we may solicit an additional proposal." Subsequently, no special meeting was called. The search committee then bypassed our normal procurement rules, interviewed two additional search firms, and received, we presume, proposals, and decided to hire the search firm SGR. This was done as a sole search, and a waiver was requested from the town administrator on or about December 6th without vote of the board. The firm was then hired, and their executive recruiter set up interviews with the BET and other personnel for the first week in January. On January 7th, a concern was raised by a BET member about the executive recruiter based on published reports. Chairman Fisher revealed that he was already aware of the concerns voiced about the executive recruiter, but, quote, "I determined it wasn't material." He did not disclose it to the fellow board members before that time, and at least one other member was also aware of these concerns. Four BET members requested that we have a meeting to discuss the concerns. That was denied, and we were then forced to invoke our standing rule to call this special meeting. So I don't believe that our purpose in calling this meeting was not to litigate the facts or debate what caused the controversy reported in the newspaper. It is not the role of the BET to sort out fact from fiction in the firm's delivery of services to our town. Rather, the reason for the special meeting was to discuss and ultimately decide what a majority of BET members think the expectations of what the residents of our town believes this board should deliver. It is regrettable that the search firm assigned an individual who, by all published reports, has a number of concerns. We believe the concerns raised as a result of these published reports has tainted our search process. This board decided to bypass our normal procurement process of issuing an RFP and do a sole search, a sole whatever it is. Sorry, I can't think of the word. But again, in doing so, basically, the representation we believe that was made was that there's no specter of any issue with the search firm, and that they are the only qualified search firm that can do the job. We do hope in the end, if the decision is that we continue with this firm, that they hire, we hire a person that's worthy of being the controller of our town. But again, we believe that it is not wise judgment to use somebody that has a specter or an issue in searching for this highly visible and highly valuable position.
Does anybody else care to comment?
I mean, are you going to respond, Terry, or?
I was giving others the opportunity first.
I'll wait till you respond.
Well, I would say that, essentially the search committee did conduct an RFP process by inviting proposals from 3 firms. SGR was not identified until after the November meeting, when the board approved by an 8-4 vote a transfer of funds in the amount of $32,000 to cover a search firm. No search firm was identified prior to that vote. It is perfectly within the process and procedures of the town to then request a sole source approval from the town administrator, which was done. It's not an unusual practice. The search committee evaluated the only 2 firms that provided proposals. The third really didn't provide anything. And a fourth did not respond or declined. So it was really between 2 firms, and SGR was head and shoulders above the other firm. As for comments about the individual that SGR has selected for the job, there's a lot out there on Google. There's a lot out there on search. You can find all sorts of mean stuff about anybody. We're not engaging this person to be hired by the town. We're engaging him to be a search professional. And I'm very confident in the firm and in the person. So I'll leave it at that. Isha, you wanted to be recognized?
Yes, thank you. I think I just want to start by saying I think there's a lot of issues with why we're here today, but what precipitated this discussion really is some of the concerns that were raised about this firm and this individual specifically, and of course the chair deciding that they were not material for this board to be aware. I'm not sure. I'd like to just, through the chair, ask other members of the search committee who was aware of some of these issues. If Ms. Moriarty, maybe if you want to comment, if your caucus was aware, because we, of course, as you know, were not. But is this something you were aware of before you hired the firm? And if not, when did you get to know?
I'm hesitating only because I don't know that this line of questioning is really going to result in, I'm not sure what motion you're going to get at. I support this firm. I support the consultant who is leading the charge. And I don't expect to agree to any modification in that. So I think that's the statement that I have.
Well, Leslie, I think I'm just, Harry, if it's okay, I'd like to just ask through you. I'm just trying to understand, because I think for most reasonable people, I think some of the public information that was out there about this particular candidate would at the very minimum raise concerns. At least it would beg asking questions. So
with all the information I have
so I guess the
available
question
to me now.
The question I'm asking you, Leslie, is, I'm trying to understand judgment, right, of individuals. So if we are entrusting a search committee to act on behalf of the full BET. I would expect you to use good judgment. And if you're saying you weren't aware, you found out about it later.
I haven't responded to that question, and I don't plan to respond to that question.
Well, I think it's unfortunate if you're not going to respond to
I
that
think
question.
lots of this is unfortunate, but let
Yeah.
me make a statement because you've addressed it and I now have the floor. This is a board of 12 people. 12 people rarely agree on everything. And the search process is going to require, and just like all of our committees, it requires a reliance on the people on that committee to manage the process, not to withhold information and not to exclude members from the rights that they have as a board member. Every board member here is going to have the right to vote on the candidate, is going to have the ability to interview candidates. The search committee is merely providing the procedure and the process that we're going to use to get there. This after the fact identification of issues making us lose confidence in the process or attempting to lose confidence in the process is not helpful to this board. As I said, I have confidence in strategic government resources to perform the search. I have confidence in the consultant that they have assigned to our job, and I plan to continue working as hard as I can to solve the problem that this board has, which is succession planning.
Okay, well, I think, Harry, if you don't mind, I wasn't finished speaking, but it's obviously clear that Leslie's not going to answer that question, but I do want, there was a policy and procedures meeting just before this, as you know, at 3 o'clock, and I did attend that meeting. That's a meeting that's an ad hoc committee of the board. Leslie Moriarty and Karen Faciolotis are members, and the purpose of that meeting was to discuss, should we maybe alter the BET process or at least outline. And in that meeting, I asked Ms. Moriarty, what was the intent of that approval that we gave at the November meeting? November 18th, for full disclosure, we had a meeting of the BET where we approved $32,000. And Harry, you're correct, it was to hire a search firm. I actually went back and listened to that meeting after we discussed to see what was the intent of that approval. And the intent of that meeting was to approve the firm proposal that we had gotten, which was not SGR, and it was very specific to the individual firm that you all were discussing. And it was $29,000. We went as far as to say the proposal we have in verbal confirmation is $29,500 plus expenses. Therefore, we would like to have $32,000. Ms. Moriarty, you went on in that meeting to say, if this proposal comes in and it doesn't seem like, because the concerns why we voted 8-4 was we didn't have a proposal in front of us, and you were asking the BET to approve $32,000 for a proposal no one had seen. At that meeting, Leslie, you said, I don't think we would move forward, and we would call a special meeting if we got additional proposals. That's what you said at that meeting. You can go back and listen to it. I just listened to it before I walked in. So again, the intent was to hire this specific firm, not SGR, the other firm that we did not hire. Now, I think, do we trust that, okay, that firm didn't work out, you decided to interview another firm, that firm was better. It appears that you got another proposal a couple weeks later, and within 24 hours, the search committee, which happens to be the budget committee, agreed to hire this firm without any transparency to the full board. Nobody on this board knew that you had swapped out the initial firm for the second firm until after the decision had been made. And this is clear through communication to this board. So I think some of the issues we're having is with the transparency. After the firm was hired, some of these concerns were raised. And I think it's probably fair to say that there wasn't appropriate due diligence done on this new firm, since you probably hired them within a 24 to 48 hour period from the time you interviewed them. That's what the timeline is showing. The other point I'm going to raise is this issue of single source, sole source. I'm going to read this from the purchasing audit statement from a year or so ago. Per policy, and this is, I think you guys did single sourcing, not sole sourcing, so I think the vocabulary, Mr. Fisher, you're using is incorrect. But per policy, single sourcing occurs when there is more than one viable supplier, but the purchasing department, in this case, the search committee, determines It's in the best interest of the town not to utilize the bidding process and select a particular vendor based on one or more significant business reasons. Single sourcing per policy is utilized only when absolutely necessary. Now, you guys went down this route of hiring a different firm without even discussing it with the full BET. And then when we ran into problems with the new firm, there doesn't even seem to be an acknowledgement to the full board that yes, and listen, I'm not here, looks like everyone on this board has already made up their mind on which way we're going to vote, but I think it's really important for the public to understand how this process has failed, how the members of this committee have acted not in good faith and not with good, and in my view, not in good judgment. I mean, I'll wait to see if there's any comments before I continue, but I have a lot of problems with how this process was carried out, and I've lost a lot of faith in, especially members of, I don't know if members of the other caucus would like to comment, how they feel about some of these concerns. Does nobody have any problems with some of the concerns that were raised outside of the search committee? I mean, are we all like, everybody's okay with this, or everybody feels like these are not material concerns? I mean, I would love to just hear people's comments on this.
Does anybody else want to comment?
I would just like to echo what Nisha has said, and the reason for raising this is, again, certain representations were made at the November meeting that just were not met, and it's very disappointing that this board is condoning this behavior.
Mr. Weisbrod.
So I'm listening to this, and I have to say, is it any wonder that this BET has fallen into a sense of chaos, disruption, and, lack of achievement? You're just seeing an example of this unfolding right here. The facts are that our chair, I'm a Democrat, our chair is a Republican. We see eye to eye on few things. But we try to work together. We try to work together to get the business of this town done in an organized and disciplined, yes, transparent, and insightful way. And where there's an opportunity to do that, we'll do it. One of the most pressing things facing us as a BET, and perhaps even as a town, is the replacement of our esteemed controller, CFO, essentially, Pete Minarski. And so in the normal course of business, the chair of our BET, Harry Fisher, came up with the idea to create a search committee, which is perfectly within his domain, perfectly within his rights, and perfectly normal. There's nothing unusual about this. And he decided to create this search committee with 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans. I must say, this committee has been collaborative, it's been transparent, it's been functioning well, it's been open, it's been honest. All the information that we've obtained, we've passed along to various members of the BET. We have had a full, detailed, side-by-side, step-by-step partnership with the town's HR department. Absolutely none of this is being done in any kind of vacuum. We've engaged with the town administrator as need be. Major steps, including the accessibility of the search entity to every member of the BET, were followed. So every single person on this panel had an opportunity to meet with, interview, and discuss the search with the search firm. So it's a very well-regarded search firm. I think you're hearing a lot of innuendo, casting aspersions, which I think is unfortunate and inappropriate. The search firm has done many searches around the country successfully, is well known to our HR department, has succeeded in placing people in municipal jobs all over the place. The vote at the search committee was not at all controversial. We did interview several different firms and came up with this one as the most competent of the ones we met. That's the role of the search committee, is to conduct the search. So I would say, let's bring this matter to a vote if there are those who, for reasons that I cannot understand, whether they want to embarrass our chair, whether they want to disrupt the process of the BET to find a successor to Mr. Minarski, whether they have some other kind of goal, I'm at a loss. But if they are uncomfortable, for whatever reason, they are entitled to bring to a vote, and I would suggest the chair bring this matter to a vote, which is item number 1 on the strategic government resources search firm. If the majority of the BET is not in favor, then so be it. But I would, at this point, rather than belabor an issue and consume time on things that are not really achieving anything, urge our chair to bring the matter to a vote.
Yeah, I'd like to
Ms. Aurora?
I'd just like to respond to David. I think David, if through you, Harry, I'd like to ask David a direct question, because I remember at the November meeting, I think, Mr. Weisbrod, you did make comments that we don't want to set a poor precedent. We are not setting a precedent, and everybody seems to be on the same page, and we're going to act in transparency. I mean, do you feel that that particular meeting on November, when we were approving the 32,000, was for this firm or a different firm? And if it were for a different firm, because that's what the understanding is, do you feel as a member of this search committee, you had a responsibility to alert the entire BET that not only had you within a 48-hour period interviewed a different firm, hired a different firm, and then after the fact communicated to the BET a month later, do you feel that is transparent? Is that how you would want to have information relate to you if you are not on the search committee? And as in regards to the chair, et cetera, whatnot, yeah, I mean, you can do those dialogues with each other, but I think it's very clear to the public what you are saying and what exactly you are not saying, what information you knew, what information you did not know, and what you chose to share with the rest of the board. And I think it's really, I am also very disappointed in my other Democrat colleagues that appear to have, are not going to speak today, and maybe they've made a decision not to speak. But I think it's very disappointing just because the vote is in your favor. You're not going to at least comment on the fact that either you have no concerns, you also believe. I don't think this is unreasonable to think when you have public information in 50 different sources about a particular candidate that it is immaterial. We're not talking about information that has been emailed or confidential. We're talking about very public information in multiple sources, and whether or not that plays out is not the point. The point is we did not do due diligence on this firm because the search committee members who were allocated to this appears to have relied on other individuals. So, I mean, the question for you directly, Mr. Weisbrod, is do you feel you were transparent in this committee?
Well, I refuse to be under an inquisition. You may want to use your tactic of inquisition with others within your own party, and you can get away with that, be my guest. But I have no intention to be submitted to any sort of
Well, you don't have to answer the question, David. That's
questions.
fine.
I've stated the point.
Yeah.
I think it's quite clear, and I think the public gets it. Your objective is to cast aspersions and create
No.
innuendo
It's
and
not.
to embarrass the chair of the BET. And you can proceed to your heart's
That's
content.
actually not my purpose,
Well,
David.
I don't know what your intention
Mr.
is.
Weisbrod
Yeah,
has the floor.
my intention, David, is to have you answer a question which you are not answering. Other than being condescending and laughing,
I don't
it's
report
silly,
to you,
David.
Nisha, and I
It's
hope I
silly.
never will.
Yeah, it's absurd.
It's,
And
let me just say something. It is extremely unusual and I think unseemly for us to be questioning each other in the format that's being done this evening.
Okay.
Can we move to the next item on the agenda? There's
No,
no
I-
motion on the
I was
floor.
going to ask if there was a motion to be
Yes.
made on the first item.
yes, and just for the record, this is not innuendo, casting aspersion, disrupting, or embarrassing this committee. This is about transparency and information and what we vote on. I have a motion to terminate the contract with Strategic Government Resources, SGR, pursuant to paragraph 6 of the contract between SGR and the town of Greenwich.
I'm going to second it.
Okay, it's been moved by Ms. Vasiliotis, seconded by Ms. Aurora. So we will take a record vote. The motion is to terminate the contract. Mr. Alfano?
Yeah. Yeah.
Mr. Kalb?
Just to be clear, a yes vote is a vote to terminate, and a no vote is to reject the motion to terminate.
That's correct.
I vote no.
Ms. Jansen?
Yes.
Mr. Weisbrod?
No.
Ms. Moriarty?
No.
Ms. Tarkington?
No.
I'm a no. Ms. Vasiliotis?
Yes.
Mr. Selps? Stephen, are you there? Ms. Aurora?
Yes.
Mr. Deschamps?
No.
Mr. Alcheck?
No. Do you want to give Stephen one more chance to see
Yeah.
if he's there?
Mr. Selps, are you there? I thought I heard that ring that had joined. Maybe star 6 to unmute?
No, I don't think he's there.
Okay, so count Mr. Selps as absent. So there are 3 yes. 4 yes, I'm sorry. 4 yes and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 no's.
I have another motion.
Okay,
Motion to,
Can you hear me now?
yes,
well, the vote's closed.
I'm a no.
you're a no, thank you.
You close the vote, Mr. Chairman. You moved on.
Yeah, you did call the vote.
Okay, sorry, Stephen, we're not going to count it, but I appreciate you trying.
I have a motion to request that Strategic Government Resources SGR assign another SGR employee to conduct the nationwide search for the town of Greenwich Controller.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded, moved by Ms. Vasiliotis and seconded by Ms. Aurora, that we request SGR to find another individual to conduct the search. I think if it's all right, we'll just move to a vote. Mr. Alfano?
Yes.
Mr. Kalb?
Absolutely no.
Ms. Jansen?
Yes.
Mr. Weisbrod?
No.
Ms. Moriarty?
No.
Ms. Tarkington?
Yes.
I'm a no. Ms. Vasiliotis?
Yes.
Mr. Selps?
No.
Ms. Aurora?
Yes.
Mr. Deschamps?
No.
Mr. Alcheck?
No.
Okay, that is 5-7-0. All right, we'll move on to the second item, which is review, revise as needed, finalize, and vote on a final job description, salary range, and other benefits for the controller position. Does anyone wish to be recognized in this matter?
I mean, I have a comment on not the job description, but just the compensation. But if anybody else has any comments on the job description, I don't have any comments on that. If nobody does, then if it's okay, I'll just start. The only comment I had was on the compensation. I think we list the job description as $230,000 for this particular role. I did sit with Clay Pearson, who's the individual from SGR that's on our account, and he asked me, particularly at this meeting, you know, was I comfortable raising the salary requirements from, I think it was 200 to 230, and I asked him what the basis of that was, and I didn't really get any data. It was just more of, you know, the standard of living is higher in Greenwich, therefore. I asked if we had done any benchmarking. We didn't have any, and I asked the HR committee. Didn't look like we ever got any answers from HR on that. So I did look around to see kind of what the average comptroller in the state of Connecticut makes, and also in our neighboring towns. And again, I requested this information from other sources, but did not get it, which is why I looked it up myself. I know some members of this board don't appreciate when I do my own research, but I really tried to get it from people within this building, but I did not get it. So in the state of Connecticut, the range is pretty wide. It's between like 140 to 180. And Mr. Minarski, if you have any comments on that, or if you think that's fair, please chime in. that's just based on public information that, it's very hard to get the actual data. You have to be a member of CCM, which I didn't have access to, but if you think that sounds like the right range, please correct me if I'm wrong. I did look up our immediate neighboring towns of Stamford, Darien, and New Canaan to see what their controller is compensated and also where they rank with other individuals within their town. So in Stamford, the controller is 186,537. In Darien, it's currently vacant. Their finance director went on to become the town administrator, but before she moved on, she was making around 160, and the new position in Darien, which is also for the controller or the finance director, is advertised between 150 to 174. In New Canaan, they have a CFO who came from Wilton with 20 years of municipal experience. It's the only employee that's in the top 20 that is not in the fire or safety, fire or police. They are making 178. And of course, in Greenwich, Pete, you're also in the top 20. The point I'm making is that the average compensation for a finance director / controller in the state of Connecticut and or neighboring towns is somewhere in the vicinity, if you look at neighboring towns, in the 175 to 190 range. So I think what I'd like to do is make a motion to, and depends on, I'd love to have a discussion if there's members of either party that are willing to engage in this, open to either changing the number. The way we've presented is to compensate around 230,000. I'd prefer a range, and I would suggest a range of 175 to 195, or if you want to pencil in a number, I would do 175,000, which is the average of the three towns around us, Stamford, Darien, and New Canaan. The average of their three comps is 175. But I'm happy to make the motion based upon if there's any comments from others. If there's not, I'll just go for it.
Ms. Tarkington.
So I don't agree with this motion. I do think that you can't just compare our chief financial officer as such with these other towns. Our TOO is very different. It's very flat. Our chief financial officer, which by charter, written 100 years ago, almost 100 years, I guess it must be almost 100 years ago now, defined it as a controller. Really, our chief financial officer is the only person that touches every single department, whether they're part of the general fund or whether they're part of the other revenue funds. I think that when Hay came in and did a very professional study of all positions, when they were looking at compensation, they really looked at our corner of the state, the kind of people that we attract. When you look at the people that report to the chief financial officer in Greenwich, each and every single one of them has come out of the private sector, whether directly or indirectly. And part of that Hayes study was to look at the corporates around. No, we can't begin to compare with the salaries that they pay because we have other benefits, as we all know. But I believe that it was tagged at 75% of the equivalent corporate salary for that type of job. Also, we attract from nonprofits, or they take the kind of people that we would need for a CFO. We really have to look much more broadly. And looking upstate or at some of these things or organizations that are not ourselves is, to me, much too simple. Do I agree that we need to look at these things? Do we need to appropriately benchmark? Do we perhaps need to get good outside advice on this particular thing? The answer is yes. But I will not be supporting this motion because I think it really has not done the kind of research or the kind of background that we need to consider when we hire what I believe is the most important person for continuity in the town of Greenwich.
Ms. Vasiliotis.
Well, Leslie, I think you've made the point, but I'm going to ask through the chair to the search committee members, what benchmarking has been done to come up with a salary of 230 and 230,000, and how was that number derived?
The search committee has not discussed compensation.
Well, the materials that were sent has suggested a 230.
It's on the job description, Harry, that you forwarded around
Yeah.
today. It was on there.
Okay, it was on there, but we have not discussed compensation. I think we've been waiting to
I mean, aren't we
meet.
approving
We
that?
waited to meet with the search firm and solicit advice. He did give some advice of a 230 to 250 number. I don't think we ought to be setting the compensation for this position based on a single member's research. I think there's a lot more work to be done in preparing for this search to determine what a salary is. And-
Harry, you sent
and-
around a job description.
Excuse me, I'm not finished. And at the end of the day, the market's going to set the salary.
Okay.
It's Aurora.
So you sent around a job description yesterday and said, here it is for review for today's meeting. And if you go to the very last page, it has compensation for this role. I'm assuming you would have read the materials that you sent around. The other point I'm going to make to Ms. Tarkington, you said that the CFO or controller in Greenwich is so different than our neighboring towns, has different responsibility set. This is a job description I'm reading for every single one. Budget preparation, financial management, treasury and investments, auditing and compliance, internal controls, debt management, public reporting, leadership. You can go through details of individuals, and I did do that, and I didn't do it because I wanted to. I did it because nobody in that search committee had done that research, and I was being asked to comment on if I was ready to increase the salary. So if you're going to ask me, within the recruiter asked me directly, are you willing to increase the salary? And the question I asked is, what information can you provide me? They provided me nothing, which is why I went back and looked this up myself. I will say that the conversation, again, this is an issue of, maybe we could see differently, or we don't want to benchmark, we want to come up with our own number because you value this position differently. I would ask, why 230? Why not 480? Why not 370? Why 230? Why is that on the job description? It has come from somewhere, right? So the most effective way to do compensation on a search would be to benchmark against something. And I think benchmarking against the three neighboring towns is not unheard of. So I'm not sure why this is such even a contentious point to be made.
That's usually done by the HR department. Ms. Tarkington.
I was going to say exactly that. These are the kind of things that normally are done by the HR department, and I believe that's where those numbers came from, and the HR committee in terms of the ranges. In my involvement on this search committee, there was no discussion that I can remember about compensation. And I can also say that the consultant also did speak to me about a range which was similar to some of what's being discussed here. I felt that was very inappropriate. If you remember, I didn't vote for that, the last vote. So after I finished, there were 2 or 3 things that were brought up, and one of them was a compensation. I felt that in order to properly do this, exactly, we need to do benchmarking. We need to offer something that's going to produce the kind of person that we want. Also, look at what we've had to do in order to hire a town administrator. Look at what the Board of Education has done to transfer, the town administrator over there. Open the charter. What's the first position mentioned in the charter? Yes, it's the controller. And that whole thing is on finance. And then look for the town administrator. Nope, not in the charter. The RTM did not approve that position as a charter position at all. So I do think that some of this conversation, I think, is important conversation to have, very important conversation to have. But it goes well beyond what was this search committee. And I'll add something else. We all thought we were operating under a period of urgency for this board and for this town. And yes, as I went back, I didn't wait until today or yesterday to go back and look at that website. When this conversation first came up, the first thing I did was go back and watch November meeting. So I do think that, none of us on this board are perfect, but people were trying to do the best thing for the board. And, I think we all need to work together to come to a conclusion and do a great search because that's going to help all town employees and this board and Mr. Menarski, who's been a fabulous controller, and we've been most fortunate to have him.
Mr. Weisbrod?
So this whole conversation is really premature. As Mr. Fisher just said, the search committee hasn't even really discussed at all the issue of compensation. We hired a search firm. Part of the job of the search firm will be to come up with recommendations as to job description, which is still being circulated, discussed among members, all the members of the BET, and compensation and benefits and other type of issues. This is a terrific opportunity for the entire board, all 12 of us, to work in collaboration, as the search committee is doing across party lines, to come up with the best solution that we can with regard to what the job scope is, which we have a pretty good handle on, with regard to benefits, with regard to compensation. And so I would suggest that rather than have a incoherent, frankly, discussion about this before the work has been done by the search firm and circulated to the BET fully, we let the process unfold, and we can discuss it as we need to, and then have a vote at the appropriate time. But this is not the appropriate time because the work hasn't been completed yet. And to Ms. Tarkington's point, yes, there is an element of urgency here. We've implored upon our controller to stay with us. He's been seeking to retire, and he's graciously agreed to stay while we conclude this search. And, you know, the notion of going into a budget season without a full staff of our terrific controller and budget director, that's the one thing all 12 of us agree on, is the competency, skill, dedication, temperament, and so forth of Mr. Menarski and Mr. Geiger. And so we have an element of urgency, not to miss a beat, not to skip a step, not to act imprudently, no, but to act in a real-time way to get, you know, to assess candidates and to have them so the public knows all the candidates' resumes will be circulated to all the people on the BET. There's no element here whatsoever of hiding anything or keeping anything from anybody at all. Every person on the BET will have an opportunity to see these people, will have an opportunity to interview finalists that are determined and to vote. So, you know, this whole thing is a distraction, and I think it's an unfortunate one. Let's collaborate, for heaven's sakes, and work together to get this job done in a cooperative way.
Can I?
Anybody else?
I just have maybe a clarifying question for you, Harry.
Fisher?
Yeah. Is that Stephen?
I'm sorry, I apologize. I have a conflict. I can't shake, so I'm leaving the meeting. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for letting us know. We appreciate it.
I just had a
Ms. Aurora.
clarifying question. So I think what I'm hearing David say is that, or Mr. Weisbrod say, is that all 12 members of this board will be able to vote on the job description and the compensation, and it will not just be the search committee. And then second, I believe Mr. Weisbrod just said that all members of the BET will get to see all of the resumes and decide who the finalists will be, not just the search committee. Mr. Fisher, if you could just answer,
No,
if you could just clarify what the role of the search committee versus what the role of the full board will be, because again, the reason we are here is up to this point. Leslie, is it okay if I finish talking? Leslie Tarkington, is it okay if I finish talking? It would be okay if the reason we are here today is decisions have been made by 4 members of this board in a search committee format, which has not even been disclosed to the public. And we have, up to this point, have had no contribution to which firm has been selected. That's been obviously to your purview. Obviously, that's why we're having this discussion in public. So it would be nice if you could clarify for the public now what role this full board will play in confirming the job description, the compensation, and the selection of the finalists.
I did not hear Mr. Weisbrod say the things you
We can rewind the tape, if you can just clarify.
The intention is that the search committee will conduct the search. As I said a few minutes ago, I think the market is really going to set the compensation for us. We're going to learn a lot as we go through interview processes. It'll be the role of the search committee to work with the search firm, narrow down a list of candidates to finalists, whether it be 3 or 4, I don't know. And that the board would then have the opportunity to interview the finalists, with the board making the final decision. I've sent around yesterday from SGR their initial draft, which has included in it a whole lot of information, and I hope we'll have comments back. As for the job description itself, sure, you want to comment about it specifically, that would be fine, but I don't think we ought to be trying to redraft it in this meeting when we have our regular meeting in 30 minutes. So I would ask for a motion, if there is a motion in regard to the second item on the call.
Motion on the table for a range.
Is there, well, I heard a motion described but not made, and it certainly wasn't seconded. So is there a motion in regard to anything having to do with the second item on the agenda?
I mean, I can try to make a motion, and you can tell me if it's appropriate or if you feel it's too early in the discussion, but I think what you're saying is the job description you sent around with the compensation is in draft mode, I think that's what I'm hearing you say. So I'll make the motion to adjust the compensation outlined in the draft controller job description to $175,000 to ensure alignment with similar positions in neighboring towns, reflecting the competitive market standards. And I'll leave it at that. If there's a second to that.
I heard, is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, it's been motioned and seconded by Ms. Aurora and Ms. Faciliotis. I heard you say a range in the,
I am happy to change the vocabulary to motion, and this is how I looked up how Darien is also looking for a controller. They write it as starting salary, so I would suggest changing it. It's right now, the way it's written in the job description is Greenwich is offering a salary of about $230,000. I would suggest changing it to Greenwich is offering a starting salary in the range of $175 to $190, and then leave everything else alone, which is depending upon qualifications, et cetera. Again, I know this is draft, so maybe this is preemptive, but I think, again, it looks like the search committee is going to make the decision on this. So I'd like to make sure that all 12 members can opine on this if we don't get a chance to participate in the discussion.
all right, so as I understand it, the motion is to adjust the range on the job description from the current range to a range of 175 to 195?
So we can say the motion is to delete 230,000 and provide a range of 175 to 190. We don't provide a range right now. We just have hard-coded in 230,000.
Okay, is that acceptable to
Yes.
Ms. Faciliotis? Yes? Does everybody understand? All right, Ms. Moriarty hasn't spoken in a while. I'll recognize her.
Yeah, so I want to comment on two things. First, just to draw everyone's attention, there was a job description already posted on the town's website, and it has a range of 200 to 230, just to refer to you. The document that we did before as we were trying to conduct the search ourselves. But I think to discuss, I think the salary discussion is premature because as people know who have hired individuals, salary is a negotiated item based on experience, based on the job needs, what people brings to the job, what people would bring to the job. And I think it would benefit this board to be flexible, to recognize the importance of the role. Look, we can't hire an assistant budget director at 140, right? So I don't know what's out there, but I think it's pretty unrealistic and to think that we are going to hire a controller in at 175, I don't know. We had a range or a job description out there at 200, and I think it was incumbent upon this board to make sure we have the best qualified individual to keep this board moving forward and the town safe in a financial standpoint. So totally premature in my mind to set limits, upper limits for this, so that we just we disincentivize people from looking for this job. And I think it's something that as we work through the details of the job, we get the information on what other searches from this firm and other communities have done as we go forward. With the search process, we will have more information. So I think I'm not supporting this motion. I think it's very premature to even have had this conversation, understanding how search processes go.
Ms. Vasiliotis.
Anytime anybody goes for a job, there's a range of salaries and they decide whether or not, I mean, to say that the market will set the compensation is just basically giving people a blank check to fill in whatever they want. I think this is very appropriate as a starting point. It can be fine-tuned as we go along, but at least we have a starting point, and then we move on from there.
No.
Mr. Tarkington.
Yeah, I do want to speak. I think that the BET HR committee is failing this board and our best employees. I just went in and looked at, the exhibits that we have in our budget book that we approved. And the latest MC we have there is, I think July, it's 2 years old. And it's 93. And so I don't know what the ranges are for an 11, but it appears to start, if we want to look ahead, basically what we're, by the time we get there, it's going to be close to 200,000 as a bottom number and approximately $300,000 as a top number. And so I think in doing your due diligence, you should have looked at the town's salary ranges for an 11. And I think that the HR committee needs to look at this. And of course, everyone needs to work on this together. But to spend the time on this afternoon without actually even looking at our own budget, I just, this part of this conversation, I just making me impatient.
Leslie, I
Vasiliotis?
just wanted to point out that the current ranges are based on individuals who are in their positions currently, and we fully expect that will change. I think Pete has even expressed in our HR committee that he is the highest paid and probably overpaid for the job. So again, you can cast aspersions on the HR committee and the job we are or we aren't doing. I don't really appreciate that. I think that looking at comps is definitely something we should be doing. I think that I don't know where the 230 number came from, just based on the research that I and others have done. It does seem to be overpaying for a position that other towns are not paying. And, I appreciate all your comments on how this is more, it's harder, it's a different community, it's this, it's that. But, I just, I think that there's support for the numbers that the range that we're proposing. So I would move that we take a vote and end the discussion and move on.
Okay, without objection, I'll call the roll. This is to change the range on the job description, change to a range of 175 to 190. Mr. Alfano.
Yeah.
Mr. Kalb.
No.
Ms. Jansen.
Yes.
Mr. Weisbrod.
No.
Ms. Moriarty.
No.
Ms. Tarkington.
No.
I'm a no. Ms. Vasiliotis.
Yes.
Mr. Selps is absent. Ms. Aurora.
Yes.
Mr. Deschamps.
No.
Mr. Alchek.
No.
Okay, that's 4-7-0. Okay, moving on to the third item, and I note we've got about 20 minutes left before our next meeting, if we can be efficient. The next item on the agenda is review, revise as needed, finalize, and vote on a final BET procedure for filling positions reporting directly to the board. Do I have discussion on this?
Yes, the HR committee took this up. We were not a full complement, so we did not take a vote on on the matter. The Policies and Procedures Committee met at 3 o'clock today to discuss a alternative procedure which was circulated to the entire board earlier today. The vote on that was 1-1, and then an alternate proposal, which I think is before you on this table, was circulated and discussed, and that vote was 1-1, so both motions failed.
Okay, is there a motion to be made? Tonight.
I move that, a vote be taken to include the search committee and description of responsibilities as a committee in the BET Policies and Procedures Reference Manual, as was circulated earlier today to the entire BET.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved by Ms. Vasiliotis, seconded by Ms. Aurora, to move forward with what is titled the BET procedure for positions directly reporting to the board, which I believe is in the packet.
No, it's a substitute motion that was sent around earlier this morning by Samantha, earlier today.
Is it the same title?
It's two, yes, it's two paragraphs.
Okay, this was sent around this morning at 10:51 a.m. And we'll get it posted in the packet as a revision. Is there any discussion on this?
I'd like to make an amendment. I'd like to
Okay.
amend that motion to replace the language in that motion with the alternate proposal that was on your tables in front of you. It's one sentence. It says, "For staff positions reporting directly to the BET, the chair will establish a search committee consisting of 2 members from each party, which in turn will determine the process and procedures for the search."
Is there a second?
I second that motion.
Mr. Olczak seconds that from Ms. Moriarty.
And I'll explain the rationale for that motion. It mirrors the rest of the way that our committees are typically structured, with 4 members on it, 2 from each party. And it mirrors the very broad description of the scope of the responsibilities. I think anything further than that, any more detail in that, limits the ability to conduct the responsibility of what's needed at the time. We don't know what's required for an assessor search. We don't know that the situation for a controller search may be different, and I think that that should be delegated to the members of those committees.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Ms. Vasiliotis.
I will not be supporting this motion, although I'm sure the majority will be for their own reasons. But I think that this whole process has shown that letting the committee members determine the process and procedures for the search has woefully been, has failed this board woefully. And I do not think that that's the appropriate thing for a search committee to be able to do. Without transparency and without clarity as to at what points the search committee should return to this board, I think we are failing the community and we are failing our constituents.
Any other, Mr. Weisbrod?
I'm going to support
And Ms. Aurora.
I'm going to support the amendment that Ms. Moriarty made. Not that it's really necessary, but I think in order to expedite matters and get on with the normal business of the BET, I take issue with the notion that the search committee has not acted with transparency and has not been clear. I think Mr. Fisher has done a good job in terms of leading the search committee and in terms of encouraging transparency, which I believe has been sufficient. So I think we should get going on our normal business and stop delaying things that are not really constructive. And let's try to work together.
Ms. Aurora?
I just wanted to comment on Ms. Moriarty's point that, to keep it this broad, to allow the committee some discretion. I just want to remind the public and this committee, about 2 years ago, we had this idea to hire a BET estimator, which we hired. The chair of the committee the chair of the BET at that time appointed a special committee. I was on that committee along with, I believe, Mr. Selbst was on that committee as a Democrat, one member from each committee. And this committee debated for almost 9 months to get the role of that committee appropriate. It was very detailed and specific as to what that committee could and could not do. And I think, Ms. Moriarty, that was one, eventually we failed in getting that process through because, there was not a lot of support from your caucus to move forward with that. And I think you led the effort to not support it. But I just want to remind you of how much input this BET and the full board had on outlining the role of that committee, just to ensure that there was transparency and there was discussion. To write a one-liner to say, well, that's going to be enough, and just trust the 4 members of the search committee, which I want to remind everyone have still not been publicly disclosed to anybody, even as of 6:15 today. So that's why there is a reason to add additional clarity to what the role of and what the process of this in going forward. I would just also remind members of the other caucus that right now, because you have the votes and the vote is leaning in your favor, and this is, a process you would like to follow, it's great to go ahead and support it, but it could easily be reversed 4 years from now, 8 years from now, when members of a different party are driving the discussion. So, I think this is just, again, a really poor precedent to allow any 4 members of this committee to be appointed by the chair to do things literally behind closed doors without any transparency, which is really what's going on.
Ms. Moriarty?
I just can't let all of these statements go by, and I really try to stay above the fray in most of these conversations. This is the evidence that this board is a failure. Unless members of this board agree to row in the same direction for a goal, we're not going to agree on everything, and there's going to be differences of opinion. And some people are going to bring expertise or interest in one area and not the other. But this whole effort of trying to undermine a search process because of transparency is not helpful to the board. It's not helpful for the job we have to do for succession planning. And to talk about what this, the policy reference manual can be changed at any time by any board member. And when I wrote this, I thought very hard about what it's like to be both majority and minority. And I've been on this board mostly as a minority member where I can't control any decision. And I've worked very hard to try to build consensus on things or to express my opinion, vote against, but not cast aspersions to people who are trying to move in a certain direction. I think the example that you gave about the cost estimator was very different. That put the BET in a totally different role than the role that we are asked to play in terms of the budget process. But anyway, I'd like to get this behind us. I would like to ask for a vote on the motions.
Anybody else? Ms. Tarkington, quickly, please.
Right, I'm just going to say, I'm not going to support this. As I look back at the last search we did, we actually went through at least 3 times for the assessors. It was also painful. And at that point in time, the people doing the search were the 2 liaisons and a person from the HR department. I think that putting together a policy on the fly without thinking through the implications as it will be across the board for all our employees and our processes is imprudent. So I won't be voting for any of these.
Anybody else? Okay, the vote is on the amendment from Ms. Moriarty to narrow it down to the 1 sentence. I'm going to support this because I don't want the other one. But when it comes to a vote on the full, I'm not inclined to have any change. So I will go through the list again. We'll start at the other end. Mr. Alchek.
Yes, I vote for the Ms. Moriarty's amendment.
Mr. Deschamps.
Yes.
Ms. Aurora.
No.
Mr. Selps is absent. Ms. Vasiliotis.
No.
I'm a yes. Ms. Tarkington.
No.
Ms. Moriarty.
Yes.
Mr. Weisbrod.
Yes.
Ms. Jansen,
No.
Mr. Kalb,
Yes.
Mr. Alfano,
No.
five noes,
Six.
so that makes it,
Motion passes.
motion passes. 750.
650.
650, I'm sorry.
I think we did Leslie's amendment, not the full.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. Unless there's further discussion, we'll vote on the amended motion.
Just did.
No, we have voted to amend the original motion. Now we have to vote on the original motion as amended. Mr. Alcheck,
I vote yes for the amended version.
Mr. Deschamps,
Yes.
Ms. Aurora,
No.
Mr. Phelps is absent, Ms. Vasiliotis.
No.
I'm a no. Ms. Tarkington,
No.
Ms. Moriarty,
Yes.
Mr. Weisbrod,
Yes.
Ms. Jansen,
No.
Mr. Kalb,
Yes.
and Mr. Alfano.
No.
560, that fails. Okay, we have completed our business. May I have a motion to adjourn? Moved by Mr. Weisbrod, seconded by Mr. Kalb. Any objection? That passes 11:00 at 6:21 PM. We'll take 10 minutes before we start our regular meeting. We got through it. I'd like to call the meeting to order. My name's Harry Fisher. I'm the chairman of the Board of Estimate and Taxation. And this is the regular meeting of the Board of Estimate and Taxation, Wednesday, January 22nd, which I'm calling to order at 6:34 in the evening. I think we can skip the Pledge of Allegiance. We had a previous meeting. We all did that at the previous meeting. So I would like to call for a motion to move into executive session to discuss legal matters.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Tarkington, seconded by Ms. Moriarty. Any dissension on moving into executive session? 6:35. At 6:35. That's 11:00. I'll just note that we have one member absent. We have one member on the telephone. Mr. Alfano's on the phone. Mr. Phelps is absent. So we're now in executive session. If you would,
Turn your mic off.
I'm sorry, what? Oh, sorry. Let them know outside, please. Okay. We have exited executive session. No votes were taken in executive session. We will have some votes in a little while on the matters brought forward.
Actually, you repeat the vote, one vote that was taken. It was moved by Karen Fasciolotis, seconded by Leslie
Moved by
Moriarty.
Fasliotis and seconded by Moriarty to exit executive session at 6:40. It was unanimous. Now, our town assessor is here to give us the assessor's report. We thank you for your patience.
No problem. Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and fellow members of the BET. I'd like to present the assessor's report for January 2025. So the 2024 grand list is done. Yay. I signed it this afternoon. I think actually we were the first town finished this year.
Terrific.
Congratulations.
Not that I get anything for that, but I get.
You get our undivided support of it.
Well, I'll take that. That sounds good. So first of all, the grand list was signed. I signed it this afternoon. Notices for real estate, any changes in assessment, that includes your exemption and/or assessment. Quality Data will be sending out those notices on Friday. We also send out notices for all personal property accounts. So those notices will be going out on this Friday. They'll probably hit next week. On the notices of it, the assessment change notices, there are the instructions for the Board of Assessment Appeals. The Board of Assessment Appeals will be present here in Town Hall starting February 3rd. The 1st is a Saturday, so they'll start taking appeals. All appeals are due. They must be in writing by February 20th. They will be, I believe the Board of Assessment Appeals will be meeting in March and starting their appeal process hearings the first week in March. The increase of the grand list. So as you know, I mentioned earlier, we have changed the way we value motor vehicles this year. And instead of taking the actual retail value of the car, we now take the MSRP. We estimated that we would probably lose about $135 million. We actually came in under that. And if you look on your report on page 2, the assessor's report on page 2, you'll see where we lost most of the money. So what we did is we took all the cars that we had on the grand list in 2023 and compared them if they were still on the list in 2024. There were 40,400 of those cars. We lose cars every year because people trade them in and they sell them and they buy new ones. So we determined the loss because of the way we depreciate in cars. You'll see that the majority of the loss is in the new years. If on a 2023 motor vehicle, we lost all cars on the 2023 motor vehicle that we had on the 23 grand list compared to the 24 grand list, we lost $30 million. Okay, and if you look at all the cars on the 22 grand list that were on the 23 grand list and the 24 grand list, we lost 31,781,370. So this chart kind of gives you the idea as to where we lost money. And on the next page, you'll see that the depreciation chart, and that's how we did it. And that's why we lost that money. So when you buy a car, we're taking off 15% first year. Okay, and then 2023 cars, we're taking off 20% of the value in the second year. Now, you took this hit this year. You won't take it again. I mean, I believe we got another 12,000 cars, new cars on the grand list this year. We'll get new cars next year. So your motor vehicle list will now continue to increase as it has in the past. But this year we took the hit. Okay. That being said, if you still look, I have the totals for the overall grand list on your back page. You'll see that the overall grand list, my estimation after Board of Assessment Appeals adjustment, we have an increase of 0.74%. And I think you were all guessing or estimating around 0.5. So we're above that. Now, I estimate my reductions of the Board of Assessment Appeals. I just don't know what they're going to do. That could be much less than that, but that's where we are at this moment. Okay? Anybody have any questions for me on the grand list so far?
Any questions? I have one. Are there any major pending legal challenges?
We have one large case. We have 13, with the exception of the private schools, we have 13 tax appeals on our docket right now, and we have one rather large commercial property.
So that could still affect the grant list?
It will affect, well, we budget $1.5 million every year as a reduction. We don't give money back. the town of Greenwich doesn't give
you-
money
you
back, so
credits.
we get credits going forward. So two things happen. You have on your budget book, I think we estimate $1.5 million every year for tax settlements. I think on average, so far, we've been about 750. We've been much less than that. Now, unfortunately, I don't get to save it and keep it going forward. But that being said, we do have one outstanding tax appeal, but I'd be surprised if it hit
Okay.
1.5. I
Thank you.
certainly will raise the flag if it gets, depending on if it was coming. One other thing I'd like to mention, we're going to the senior program. Applications for the seniors, the application period is February 1st to May 15th. Anybody that needs to apply this year for the senior program, we'll be sending them out applications by February 1st. We're going to do that next week. They're due back May 15th. You'll notice that our credit or the qualifying income on the local went from 80,000 last year to 83,500. So residents that have income less than that can apply for the local program. And the assessment is 1.857, $1,857,240,000 in assessed value. So your house has to be assessed for that or less. Yes.
Yeah, Ms. Tarkington.
Lauren, the $1,857,000, what is the market value equivalent of that?
I think we'll divide that by 0.7. I think it's
I know.
about 2.6 million, 2.7 million. I don't have my calculator on me, but yeah.
Okay. And, which is amazing that someone has a value of a home if they fit the income level, gets to use the senior tax program. And in the revow, in the past, but it's been years, you use the pictometry type of software to, sort of as a check to see if we're getting all the building permits and so forth and catching things. Do you plan to do that? It's been some years, I don't know, 5 or 6 years?
Well, what we do is we use our GIS system, and we have, for those, for the appraisers in the backcountry, that's usually where we need most of it if it's a gated house and we can't get to it. We've been using the GIS system on our own. There hasn't been a recent flyover that would correspond with the right time for us to do it. So I think there is one coming up. So if we were to do it, we could do it between the 25 and 2030 revaluations. But we needed an updated. What happens is if we continue to do our construction, the problem is that when you have a flyover that's after the fact, in other words, by the time we get the information, if we're ahead of it, it doesn't do us any good. So if they do one between 25 and 30, we may be able to use that. We'll see.
And what would be the marginal cost of doing something like that? I mean, obviously, there's a gain. We've found that we get substantial gains in the
Yeah,
past.
I'm not quite sure how much they're charging per parcel anymore, but it's very labor intensive. Because you have to take our property record card and the sketch off the property record card and overlay that with the GIS, what comes off with the GIS. So I think last time it was like 57 cents a parcel, but I'd have to check to see what the current, what it's going to cost.
Mr. Kalb?
Yes, I have a question about the monthly sales numbers of properties. Is that okay? May I ask that?
Sure.
Sure.
So just looking at the chart that you have of the residential monthly number of sales, just eyeballing it, it looks like over the last 3 years that the trend in terms of number of units sold looks like it's trending down. Just
Yes,
gradually.
you don't have as many, prior to COVID, you used to have 700 houses on the market, 750 houses on, condos on the market. Now you have less than 100.
Right, so that is a fact. You
So
know,
that is a
one-
fact, and that is yes, and that's why you see less sales. You just have less inventory.
And yet at the same time, on the following chart, it looks like the value numbers are through the roof.
They're increasing.
The trend line is much stronger. The rising trend in value is much greater.
Yes.
It's a greater rate than the declining rate of sales, as that's what it looks like anyway.
Yes, the increase in valuation since COVID has been somewhat remarkable. And I think there's a couple of things playing into that. First of all, your lack of inventory. You just don't have that many properties on the market. You took all those properties that couldn't sell that were lingered on the market for, for years are gone. I mean, I think the average listing is under 100 days now,
Well,
if it's priced right.
may I request that, in terms of the residential monthly sales chart, because this is only 3 years, I would really like, I'm sure you have the data, I'd love to see a chart over a longer period of
So
time.
if you'd like to come to our budget meeting, I usually present that at the
Okay.
budget meeting, which, yeah, and it'll be interesting for everyone to see, because we run the statistics from the last time we did the revaluation. So you'll be able to see from 10/1/21. And that's how I look at things.
Well,
I
that's
look at
what-
from one
that's-
revaluation to
Right,
another.
that's what this chart is.
Yeah.
It's a 3-year period. I'm just wondering if you have one that shows what's been going on, what the trend is over 10 years, or something like that.
I can certainly try to create that for you.
If you
It'll take
have
me a-
it, I would just like to see kind of.
You'll
if
see
there's been
something in
over time-
2020, yes.
Right,
you'll-
is there
yeah.
lumpiness or how it works? Because as a 3-year snapshot, the data set isn't that robust to draw a lot of conclusions, except, what you're saying now is very helpful in terms of, well, we used to have and inventory much greater. It would be nice to sort of see it.
So I just, add for the public and certainly for Scott and others here, we believe that the assessor will be presenting at the budget meeting, which is what she's talking about, the data that she thinks she'll like, on Thursday, February 13th at around 11 o'clock in the morning. So, so just something to put on your calendar. And the data, whether overall, which is what you're talking, or by district, is really rather amazing. And Lauren does a great job.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, could I have a motion to accept the assessor's report?
I move that we accept the assessor's report.
Seconded.
Moved by Tarkington, seconded by Mr. Kalb. Without objection, 1100 to accept the report. Thank you. Thank you, Lauren. Okay. We'll move on,
I was going to do it after the.
ladies.
Oh, she asked me a question, I was responding.
All right, we'll move on to number 4 on our agenda, which is routine applications for budget adjustments. And I'll just read these out. The first one is SE2, the First Selectman's Office, an additional appropriation of the settlement of Becker versus the Town of Greenwich in the amount of $55,000. SE5, First Selectman's Office, an additional appropriation in the settlement of Chubb versus the Town of Greenwich for $61,345.35. Third item is PZ1, Planning and Zoning, an additional appropriation for temporary salaries of $76,000. Is there a report of the Budget Committee?
No, these are routine items, and normally we don't give one, but I'd be
Okay,
happy to
I
give
can.
one if people want one.
These were all unanimously approved by the Budget Committee. So could I have a motion to approve the routine
I
items?
so move that we approve the routine items as read by Mr. Fisher.
And I'll second.
Moved by Tarkington, seconded by Moriarty. Is there any objection to unanimous consent on the routine items? Hearing none, those are approved 11-0-0. We'll move on to the non-routine items. The first one is SE6, the First Selectman's Office, and this is a settlement of Miller's Crossing versus the Town of Greenwich in the amount of $9,257.96. So I would accept a motion to,
I so move. or I-
so moved by Fasiliadis, seconded by Tarkington. Is there a report of the Legal Law Committee?
Yes, this involved a errant tree that decided to cross with a roof, and the settlement amount was $9,257.96. The town had received notice of the tree, and for whatever reason was delayed in removing the tree before it fell. So again, the amount is $9,257.96.
Any discussion or questions? Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any objection to unanimous consent on this? Seeing none, this passes 11-0-0. The next item is FD5, Fire Department, an additional appropriation of $150,000 as a replacement of Engine 51. I would note that we are taking this up under the provisions of our emergency powers to enable the fire department to, which is now 2 engines short, to purchase a used truck. They've identified a couple of them. So could I have a motion to get this before us?
So moved, FD5 for the fire department, $150,000, additional appropriation for the replacement of engine 51.
And I'll second.
And we have Assistant Chief Charlie Lewicki with us. If you would come up and discuss this for us, we'd appreciate it very much.
Good evening, members of the committee. What we originally were looking at was back in September, you approved FD1, which included $150,000 to do repairs for engine 11 as well as engine 51. Since that happened, engine 51 was now in an accident and is going to, it's in the process of being looked at by Megan D'Amato and the insurance company to figure out how they're going to fix it. But once it is finally approved, we're looking at over 6 months worth of repairs for that vehicle. As our third-party vendor looked at the repairs closer that would be needed to engine 11, it was saw that that truck is in much more disrepair than we had originally thought. That coupled with the fleet department being down to 6 or so mechanics right now is making it very hard for things to happen in-house, preventative maintenance to keep up, and we've been running with 0 to 1 spare apparatus available for most of the last 3 months, keeping Stamford on ready for them to be able to give us a spare apparatus. We don't see the end in the next 6 months here, and so we started looking at trucks that were in much better shape that had been traded in when they had received new apparatus. Looked at a couple different dealers for this, and we were able to find a couple different units that met what we would use in the department for operational readiness and that the fleet department thought were in good condition. Most of these are coming from the south, or slower departments. Their frames are in much better shape than what we have on our apparatus right now. And at a what we would believe a reasonable price of between $100,000 and $150,000, and they would be able to last us 3 to 5 years, whereas engine 11 might not be able to last 1 to 3 years. From what we're being told, and engine 51, when it gets back, we're still not sure how much time that's going to have on it from the damage past the next 3 years as well. So as we're waiting for 2 more engines to come in, they should be here in January. Those are ones that were ordered. One was ordered 3 years ago. The other one was ordered after the engine 1 accident because they were able to find an extra engine serial number for us. This is so that we can spend up to $150,000 to get a replacement engine so that we have spare engines to be able to deliver the service that we need to the citizens of Greenwich.
Let's start this off because you and I have had a number of discussions about this, and I am the liaison, one of the liaisons. It was my understanding that engine 51 was totaled. Is that not the case?
It seems that they have reversed their decision.
Really?
Yes. Once they were given what the estimated full replacement value of a fire apparatus today was, the decision where it sits right now is that because it is less than half the value of the replacement cost to fix it, they're erring towards fixing it. And that is a round number as well. I don't have it in front of me, but it's $300,000 or $400,000 worth of repairs. A brand new truck would be 1.3 million. The one that that was just approved for replacement in October was $1.267 million. I mean, there's a chance that that number could still grow for the insurance company, and that's why it's still in limbo right now. But once again, once that goes to Gowans and Knight for repair, it's going to be over 6+ months to get that back. And they also told us that they couldn't handle engine 51 and engine 11 at the same time for repairs. So we'd still be on the downside of trying to get engine 11 into better readiness state, because it's spending probably about a week or more every month out of service.
Okay. Any other questions or discussion, Ms. Tarkington?
Yeah, I'm a bit confused. This did not come through the Budget Committee, and so we don't have the details we would normally, so thank you for coming, and we appreciate that. But do you need the other money that we provided a month or two ago?
So that
For
was
operation money?
So the letter that I had in there was that once again how it works in Greenwich, I'm not exactly sure, but I was really asking for a change of scope and funding of that $150,000 to be able to use that towards the purchase of the apparatus instead of obviously fixing engine 51.
And would you still be able to do that? So that if, to take that 150, I mean, maybe we can cancel that out from operating, which would mean that we could put that back into the general fund and then give you the request here, and that would be very helpful to us if that works for you, because we know you're coming next month for an additional appropriation and release of conditions both, but.
Yeah, absolutely. I was operating under the chance that I could just reappropriate that $150,000, not ask for an additional $150,000 if I didn't need to.
So may I ask?
Yes, sir, go ahead.
Roland, Mr. Geiger, can we do something like that? Ask him to give us a letter to, or whatever you would want?
We could just reverse that additional appropriation. It comes out of their budget.
So, Mr. Chair, I would consider that we do that and certainly support whatever the fire department needs, but they indicate that, and then we will, obviously be looking at the additional requests for appropriation in the month of February.
Yeah, I guess the question, I would support that. The question is, you've got engine 11 that you also want to work on. If we take back the $150,000, you don't have the money to work on that. If we get a new used engine, does that get us to January with sufficient resources, with engine 11 sort of being your last resort?
I believe so, because if we do any long-term work at this point to engine 11, we're not gonna, we're talking about a 12-month span now, and it's probably gonna be out of service for at least 4 months anyways. So our plan is to keep nursing that engine along, so that it meets DOT standards, so it meets the operational readiness standard of the department, but not put the funding into it that we were going to try to get it to last 5 years. I think that is a tall ask at this point from that apparatus.
May I ask
Okay.
one more question? Can I just finish what I was doing, Dave? Chief, when we look at this, then you're going to be fine in terms of what you need at this point in time, if we proceed in this manner. I just
Yes.
want to make sure that you're in agreement.
Yes.
And Roland has said this can be done, so this is good news to the BET. Thank you.
Right,
Yeah,
so
Mr. Weisbrod.
given that the new engine that you'd be acquiring, the new used engine, would have a limited lifespan, out of an abundance of accounting conservatism, couldn't we just treat it as an operating expense and transfer the $150,000 and use this as an operating expense instead of the repairs for the, for the
We
acquisition?
kind of talked about that, but that's, I don't know.
It's a more conservative accounting way to deal with it, because you're just, you're essentially expensing it immediately rather than depreciating it. If you had a new piece of equipment with a long lifespan, okay, that's very different. But here, it's really a transitional piece of equipment. So I'm wondering whether it's really a capital, in the conservative sense, and a capital item that should be depreciated. Well, the simplest thing is just transfer the money and expense it. Is there anything, is that doable, Roland?
Well, we talked about this, that our criteria for a capital asset is something that lasts at least 5 years. And this is not going to last 5 years.
So you would agree with what I'm saying?
I would agree with that, yes. Is it accounting sleight of hand? Would somebody say that we're buying a truck and it's not a supply item, but
Makes me nervous, David.
Well, what's nervous? It's more conservative. It's nothing to be nervous about. It's a more conservative way to deal with it.
I don't agree.
Well, our budget director just said that it's not appropriate to capitalize items with a 3-year life. So I would defer to his judgment. I don't know
we
what's there to
we
discuss.
talked about this, it starts to become very
You know,
sketchy. And, the RTM might look at this and say, you're buying a fire truck, it's not a wrench or something like that. I don't know.
it's a judgment call either way,
Yeah. It's a
okay?
judgment call.
We've got it on as an additional appropriation. I think Roland has said he can work with the fire department to recapture the money back from the other FD1. I think the expeditious way to do this is just do it as an additional appropriation from the capital non-recurring fund, and the other money will come back to the general fund. Ms. Moriarty?
I'm going to complicate accounting further, because I don't know I don't recall in my service on the BET that we've ever recouped prior authorizations that have gone through the
We
RTM.
can use the honor system, and they promise not to spend it.
So it is the honor system,
Yeah.
okay. And good, because officially we can't
I don't-
lower their budget once we've approved to raise their budget. So I just wanted to confirm the process.
Well, if you reallocated it, there's no need to use the quote honor system. I mean, I
Well,
try.
they're coming, well, even if they don't now, we know that they're coming in for more overtime next month, so we have an opportunity to keep things straight if we felt like we needed to. We do expect our departments to have that tacit understanding of operating within the parameters that we
Absolutely.
expect, and I think in return, we give you that ability.
May I ask one more?
Yes, Ms. Harrington?
Chief, I think some of the information I heard within the last week, that's as familiar as I am about this, the cost of the truck was more like 100,000 or 120, and you're asking for 150. Have these parameters changed?
So the reason I said up to 150,000 is because we have two apparatus that we are looking at right now. When the cycle of getting this approved goes through, I cannot guarantee that they will be available to be there. So it was really more for the room of that. One of them that we were looking at is a 2004 that has 50,000 miles on it. And another one was another 2004 that actually has 12,000 miles on it from a very slow volunteer department. And that's why they're in so much better shape. Our average 10-year-old truck here has over 100,000 miles on it. So there's obviously a giant wear and tear thing there, but that's also because the original appropriation was 150,000. I was just trying to keep it in line there as well, because I didn't know if that made it easier in the record keeping.
So if this is a capital, in the capital, then if you only use 120 or 110, 112, whatever, then the rest of it will be returned after, so there's also an advantage to doing it that way. Thank you.
We just note, Chief, that once we take action on this, because it is under emergency powers, does not need to go to the RTM.
Yes.
You've got the money tomorrow.
Yes.
So,
We
assuming we
appreciate
approve
that.
it.
Yes.
I'd also like to just note for the record that I did communicate, because it is the emergency powers, I did communicate with the moderator and the chair of the town services, budget overview, and finance committees, and all four of them support us doing this under our emergency powers. Mr. Alchek?
Thank you, Mr. Fisher. Have you seen any pushback from the companies that manufacture the trucks or fix the trucks as a result of the fires in California and a surge in demand relating to, the heavy use that trucks have been getting?
Not necessarily. the apparatus being used for that is much different than what we are spec'ing to use here on the East Coast. But the supply and demand issue is still out there. It's no different than it has been the last couple of years. Everything is still depending on what kind of apparatus you're buying, 3 to 5 years out at this point. The last order that we put in, which I believe was in August, those won't be here until 29.
Wow, that's past what we originally expected.
Yeah, it
I
was
thought we
right
were
at the
talking
top end of.
2027.
No, that's the ladder truck will be here in 27.
Okay, sorry.
And no change in pricing? You haven't seen a change in pricing as a result?
No, I know that a lot of what is being priced is based on futures, but I don't think if commodity futures go down that they will be giving us checks back.
Okay, any other questions? Ms. Vasiliotis?
Yeah, could you just, I don't recall what you had said at the beginning, but you had said that these two are basically out of service. And how long have you been operating this way? In other words, you said that Stanford has been on alert?
Yes,
when you opened up?
so it's been for most of the last 6 months since the engine 1 accident. It definitely got more critical, but with only a few mechanics and 550 vehicles in the fleet, and them having to keep the plows running for snowstorms and stuff, it's obviously a big toll on the fleet department to keep everything running, and that's why we've been trying to make sure that we've been able to use volunteer apparatus where we can, or have Stanford ready to be able to help us so that we aren't going to endanger the service to the people of Greenwich.
Okay, I guess my question then revolves around, is this really an emergency appropriation? Since you have been able to do this for 6 months, and I would question that meets the definition of an emergency appropriation, but that's just my question.
If I can just make a statement on that, if I had my own mechanics in the fire department and that I could come and ask for an appropriation for overtime to make sure that they could keep my trucks running, that would be much easier for me to say that it's an emergency. But because fleet is not part of the fire department, and the fire department is not their only concern, I cannot make any statements for what the fleet director would do to make sure that I have all the apparatus running that I need.
I understand that. When I say that, I mean, we're using extraordinary powers here. We're bypassing the RTM because we're claiming that this is an emergency that needs immediate, and it just doesn't pass that smell test to me. So I understand where you're coming from, and I understand that you need this repaired, but the question is, we've been operating for 6 months, and yes, it's not the optimal, conditions. Is it really an emergency in the sense that this was meant for? When I think of this appropriation, because we had this once before when this BET did use an emergency appropriation for, I forget what, and then we were roundly criticized by the moderator of the RTM. But this is not like an earthquake or a natural disaster that requires funds to be immediately expended, particularly because you have been operating, with these conditions. So I'm not sure if anybody got a legal opinion on this as to whether it was an emergency appropriation. This is the first I'm hearing about it. Again, I would question that.
What was the date of the accident for engine 51?
I don't have it in front of
Roughly?
me, but it was in November.
In November?
Yes.
I thought it was December, because we didn't have any
Beginning of
snow in
December.
November.
Yeah, I don't have it in front of me. I
I
apologize.
thought it was December. Okay, so you haven't been operating short of that one for 6 months. Any other questions or discussion?
No, but in that time frame, we also lost a rear differential on engine 4 that needed a lot of repair. Engine 31 was out of service for a long time for an air leak. Engine 21 still has an air leak and hasn't been able to be fixed. Just off the top of my head, I'm just trying to run through the recurring issues that we've had. Engine 11 had some top-end reoccurring issues in their engine as well. So it's really, we're calling because we have nothing available, or we only have one apparatus as a spare, and the fleet department is kind of being put out and said, okay, well, I guess we have no choice. We need people to work overtime to make sure that they have a spare and they don't have to go to Stamford or try to get another truck from somewhere.
Okay, go ahead.
My comments weren't that, this shouldn't be done. It should be done. I'm just questioning the process that we're using to get it done. So,
Any other discussion? Mr. Cow?
Sorry, Chief, just quick question. One, given that a new truck costs 1.3 million, can we be sure that we're going to get something for 150,000, that we're going to get a serviceable truck that will last us for the period that you're talking about?
Yes, so when we looked at these trucks, we brought our truck committee with us. We also brought members from the fleet department to give the truck them all a once-over. When they are delivered, if you buy a used fire truck, it still needs to meet all DOT, OSHA, and NFPA standards. And that is on the seller, not on the buyer. So if anything is found in the pre-inspections, it all has to be fixed at their expense. So we will be getting the best looking truck that we can that will make us that 3 to 5 years that we want, which is why we were looking specifically for apparatus that we already have in our fleet, which would be from Pierce Manufacturing or E1, as well as checking out the frames and the subframes, the spring systems, everything on them to show that they have the right amount of wear that you would expect to see on vehicles that came from non-hilly flat areas or areas that don't have high call volume. And once we came to that consensus, that's how we decided on the trucks that we've been looking at so far.
So you guys are confident that you'll get the 3 to 5 years, spending only, less than, well, let's say it's around 10% of the cost of a new one?
Yes, but I will say that these are not abnormally priced low trucks. It's the going rate for trucks that are in this kind of serviceable condition with only 5 years left on their NFPA working life.
Got it. Okay, thank you. The other question I had has to do with the repair. I forgot which engine you're talking about. You're saying originally you thought it just needed to be replaced. It was not repairable, but it looks like now the cost of repairing it. Which engine are we talking about?
Engine 11
Engine
was
11.
part of the, from FD1, and that was roughly $75,000 for each of those trucks, and that was to do some subframe repair, as well as engine repair and put some on-spot chains back on it, things like that, so that we could try to get it 3 to 5 years. But over the last couple months, it's becoming obvious that there's more work that would need to be done to it than that to keep it for 3 to 5 years.
Okay, no, I'm talking about, thank you for that. But I was talking about the other engine you were just mentioning before, unless I misheard.
Engine 51.
Yes.
So engine 51 was in an accident in the back country. It was coming down a hill in the snow and ice, and had some severe damage done to it.
Right.
And so that's going to be the 6 to 8 months repair.
Right, and what you're saying is that the insurance company has determined that it's cheaper to repair it than it is to replace it.
At this time, correct.
Right, now, I want to make sure that, in fact, we're not being put in a position where the insurance company is dictating to us something that might be a subpar solution.
Yeah, and I believe that's why we are having follow-up conversations with risk management before we decide to go down that road.
Right, because I know that they're going to, of course, they're going to want to go for the less expensive option, but I want to make sure that, in fact, that's best for us and for the town.
And we feel the same way.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Anything else? Yeah, Mr. Deschamps.
How many times has the department needed to rely on Stanford or neighboring towns for apparatus for call-outs? And say in the last year or two?
Oh, for replacement apparatus?
Yeah, where you have them on standby or you may need them for a call. How many times in the last year or two have they been on standby?
Well, that would be two different things. So one would be us calling their fleet department and asking their availability of spare apparatus if we happen to need one. In the last 6 months, it probably happened at least once a week that we're checking on their status. As soon as we're down to one apparatus, we've been calling to double check, and then if we go down to zero, which I think a couple weekends ago, we didn't have any spare apparatus over the weekend, so we checked again to see if they'd have it and what kind of procedure it would be for us to have to get it. The only time that we actually were about to get one was when we had no ladder trucks available last year. And we had them on standby once they found out that they were going to be able to have the apparatus fixed within 6 to 8 hours.
That seems like a significant problem to me. Am I not understanding the severity of that problem where you have an aged fleet that's well over 20 years of useful life, where you're replacing engines on a regular basis, where you don't have enough service capabilities within the town? There, I'm talking specifically about fleet mechanics that you have to share with another department, where you have to call neighboring towns, where the public's safety is at risk. Am I thinking about that the right way, Chief?
Yes, sir.
And I expect, are you going to come forward to the Budget Committee in the preceding weeks here when we look at our budget for next fiscal year and make sure we understand clearly the risk that the town's facing with where we are and understanding what we can do to address it as a finance board to get you the equipment that you need?
It will be in my budget book.
Any other comments? Yeah, Ms. Moriarty, please.
I just wanted to make one more comment about the request for the emergency appropriation, because it is a provision we rarely use. But the other piece of information that I didn't hear, besides the important comments and questions that Mr. Deschamps just raised here, was the availability of equipment. You don't know what's available when. So losing time, losing another 4 weeks to get through the RTM process could put finding another piece of equipment at risk. And that's something that needs to be included in our understanding of the request.
Correct. We've been out to this purveyor command apparatus in Mount Joy, Pennsylvania twice now. And I remember earlier in my career, I had went out there with a different department, and there was hundreds of old fire trucks. And we were there in December, and we were there this month, and there's less than 20 apparatus. And if you go on their website, I think there's even less than that are for sale. And that's one of the main 5 big purveyors in the entire country. And so it's very hard to find them at this point.
Right. So besides the fact that monetarily this is really just a wash, we also do have the timeliness request, which is the most important part of that emergency appropriation.
Yes.
But thank you for that clarification.
Thank you.
Seeing nothing else, move to a vote. I think we need to do a record vote on this. Mr. Alfano, are you still there?
Yes. Yes and yes.
Great, thank you. Mr. Cowell?
Yes.
Ms. Jansen?
Yes.
Mr. Weisbrod?
Yes?
Ms. Moriarty?
Yes.
Ms. Tarkington?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Ms. Vasiliotis?
I'm voting no, not on the merits, but on the whether it's an emergency.
Mr. Selps is not with us. He's absent. Ms. Aurora?
Yes.
Mr. Deschamps?
Yes.
And Mr. Olczak?
Yes.
So that is 10-1-0. Thank you, Chief. Appreciate your hard work on this. So we'll now move to item 5, the Comptroller's Report, please.
Good evening, BET members, Mr. Chairman. Start with the ARPA. We've finally reached a big requirement to have all of the $31.4 million obligated as of December 31st. We have been obligated for a while, and we did some cleanup over the last 2 or 3 months that came before you. where we shifted a little bit of money around. Out of the 47 or 48 projects, depending on how you count them, we only have one project that's at risk, and that is the 8-38G, the trust fund. The auditors do not count a transfer from the F fund to the trust fund as an expenditure, so they have to meet the spend down requirements over the next 2 years, and meaning that it's got to be fully spent, all 31.4 by December 31st of 2026. Did some further research, and during this period going forward about final spending, there are adjustments that you can make. And I'll give you 2 examples. One is, let's just say that the auditors under the Single Audit Act, which the U.S. Treasury requires, come forward and they see that this project is not spending any money and is in violation of the rule of the U.S. Treasury. They could write us up, and what would happen is we would have to go back, and this is the $685,000. We clawed back $414,350. We would have to take it away from them and find an obligated project as of December 31st and repurpose it. And then the same thing that's more common in the audit process is you normally, if you have a $500,000 or $1 million, whatever a project is, notwithstanding additional appropriations, you almost never spend exactly $1 million. So we also have the provisions from the U.S. Treasury so that we could, let's say that we need to take $10,000 that was never spent from a project. You can go back in time and you can apply it to a obligated project through December 31st of 24. Moving on, the annual budget process. I'd like to take this time to give credit to 2 of my employees, Roland Geiger and Joan Lynch. Roland Geiger has been wearing 2 hats. He has been without his backup. You all know his backup since July. And he basically turned out the audit, which is finished and is not available to the BET until next Tuesday night when we meet before at the Budget Committee meeting. So I'd like to thank Roland, who has been basically doing 2 full-time jobs. And then you all know that Joan Lynch has been doing 2 full-time jobs at Nathaniel Witherall. The good news is they've hired a replacement. The replacement started Tuesday morning, and she still has to go through the training process. So I'd like to have them recognized for what they're doing for the finance department. I'll have one more comments. We're going to market tomorrow morning at 11 o'clock and 11:30. We're going to borrow $40 million, and we're going to borrow, that's 5-year general obligation bonds, and we're going to do $120 million of 1-year notes. Last year, we got 4.42 on the general obligation bonds. Bill Lindsay, our financial advisor, and I have been monitoring the markets. We're looking at something around 4.85. Last year, the notes came in at 307. We're looking at the 2 rates to compress a little bit, and maybe the bands will come down and they'll be very close around the 4.85 or 4.95 true interest and net interest costs for each one of them. I'll stop there and answer any questions you have on the Controller's report.
Any questions from the board for the Comptroller? Yes, Ms. Moriarty.
Just back to the ARP, just so I understand, the money would need to be applied to a project that was committed or spent before December 24, or do you have till December 26 to apply?
No, the way I read it, I did, because I knew this is going to come up. It's going to come up everywhere in the country. It has to be applied, the way I read it, to a pre-existing project that was obligated at December 31st, 2024. Okay. So we would have to go back to what Chief Lewicki was doing. We would be repurposing it from one project to another.
We had gotten the advice that it would be permitted to have it in the Affordable Housing Trust at the time that we commit and transfer the funds. So the auditor's now saying they're interpreting that differently?
No, the auditors are not involved yet.
Okay.
Okay, the auditors have been auditing this is the third year. The first year, the big expenditure was the $10 million for the soil remediation for Greenwich High School, and we only had one expenditure for $4,500. So year number one, there was basically nothing to audit, okay? I mean, they do audit is to make sure that you're in compliance with the purchasing policies, that the soil remediation was bid out, et cetera. In year 2 and 3, they take my 4 quarters that I submit to the U.S. Treasury, and they randomly select projects and make sure that they're in compliance with the purchasing ordinance and that they're eligible cost. They don't look at every dollar that's spent, so they do random selection. So they're in year 1, 2, and 3. The trust fund will not come up until next year. And as I stated before, simply because we took the 1,000,001 and moved it from the F fund, which is the grant fund where all the money is, to the trust fund, which is an I fund, the Affordable Trust Fund, is not considered an expenditure, it's a transfer. So they've got to start spending this money.
You have to spend it, but it's considered committed. We're not,
Per the statements that were made before the Budget Committee, they claim that they've got up to, and you can correct me if I'm misstating, $650,000 on 6 to 8 projects
have commitments.
committed.
Okay.
And they've got to prove that if they are in fact audited next September, October, November,
Okay.
or this September, October, November.
On a different topic, I just wanted to, congratulate Mr. Geiger and Ms. Lynch and to thank them for their contribution. Do we have, going through the budget process now, we're down one staff member, an important one in the budget area. Does that, what is the plan? What I don't know is what the pressure is on the department as we go through that. You've already have a budget in place from the first selectman and make changes, but can you identify what risk do we have? What additional resources do you think you might need or might come to us for if there's anything that we can do to assist the department getting through the crunch here?
I'll offer my opinion, but he's the expert and he lives it every year. I think that the risk is that an error might creep into the process where you don't put a proper number in a page where something has changed, something is amended. You know all the change, where they have traditionally 50 amendments, whatever. I think that's the risk that comes up is the fact that you've got all of this amendments that are going through where you're changing dollar amounts, essentially in the capital projects area, that you make a dollar error in the process. And again, I'm going to defer to Roland because he lives it. So I don't know what risk is.
We have a lot of people to check the totals when we go through the votes, I know that. But the budget's done right now, and basically, it'll be the changes that the Budget Committee makes in the full BET.
So you should just ask that we make no changes to the
that would
budget,
be
and then
good,
your
yeah.
life is easier. Okay.
I think there's also a lot of ancillary behind-the-scenes work, and, whether it's the reporting for the, the budget resolutions that we have, the reporting on the accumulating issues related to our conditions, et cetera, et cetera. I have been quite concerned about the additional workload that's been put on Roland, and I too commend Roland and Joan for the great work. But I also have another comment when you're finished, Leslie. May I make a comment?
Okay.
I would also like to commend Mr. Minarski. He does an absolutely amazing job with the rating agencies, and he had meetings with Moody's and Standard & Poor's, and we are permitted to listen on those meetings, and both his presentation and how he presents the material and how he responds to the questions is to be very much commended. So thank you, Pete.
You're welcome, and I have to comment out. I'm glad you said that because I owe the 10 of you plus one on the phone. The credit rating reports They're ready with the exception of Moody's. Lindsay and I reviewed them last Friday and Monday. We actually did look at them Monday. We had a couple of error corrections. I was going to send them out, but I don't have the final versions. So you'll probably get them tomorrow morning. I'm still waiting for one report. And
I
they're all
didn't want to
good.
bring that up, but you did a great job. Thank you, Pete.
Thank you.
Ms. Vasiliotis.
Since we're all piling on with the kudos, I just also wanted to thank especially Roland and you, Pete, of course, but especially Roland, who just sits with his head down and he does his work and he responds to questions almost immediately. I don't know how he has all the information in his head, but he's very, very much a valued member of our team. And to you, Pete, just for responding to the questions that are asked. Sometimes they're not the brightest questions, but you do that with patience and clarity. So I just wanted to thank both of you. I haven't worked with Joan a lot, so I can't really comment, but I know that she's been working hard with Nathaniel Witherall. But the two of you are doing yeoman's work, so thank you.
Thank you.
And this is not meant to hurry you out the door either.
Mr. Alchek.
Thank you. Pete, can you tell us again the exact day and time of the sale, the competitive sale?
11 o'clock is the bond issue, and 11:30.
bands?
They're done electronically. Okay.
And what day is that again?
Tomorrow morning.
Tomorrow morning, okay.
And what I was going to do was, being that I'm late getting the credit reports out, I was going to send, there's three of them, two from one firm and one from S&P and Moody's. And I was going to send the results out about 12:30 with the reports. And
we expect triple.
no, we don't expect, we got triple. We've already got the ratings.
You have, okay.
We just, they were slight little nits. For example, one of them put down that we were going to market for 125 million when we were going 120. They're very, very small, but I didn't want to send out reports that were incorrect with minor errors.
Okay. I want to, just for a moment, pile on to what Leslie T. was saying a moment ago, because this may be the last time that we have you here doing this. I have listened over my career to hundreds of presentations to rating agencies and to the bond market. And I got to say, terrific job on your part. The town, you reflect the town incredibly well. And, I'm not sure the average citizen in town sort of recognizes the importance of that. But as somebody that spent my career doing it, you represent the town's interests so well, and we are all grateful for your high professionalism and your high work ethic. So thank you.
Thank you again.
As chair, I probably ought to pile on and just,
Don't say beloved.
I'll echo everything that's been said. You guys do a terrific job. Thanks to your team, and keep it up, please, as long as possible.
That's a good, I'm glad you said team. It is a team. We all work well together.
Yeah, you really do.
Your job is easier when you're a team. There's a synergy, when you're not by yourself, and you're, not only Joan and myself and Maureen in the past, and Natasha is great as far as when we all work together and we make each other's jobs easier.
Right. So at this point, I'll take a motion to accept the controller's report.
So move, we accept the controller's report.
Moved by Tarkington, seconded by Moriarty, to accept the controller's report. Any objection to unanimous consent? Seeing none, that's 11-0-0. So if you would now give the treasurer's report, please.
The treasurer's report is pretty much uneventful. It's usually a low point in cash balances in the general fund. You can see the 54.9. That's somewhat a little bit inflated, because if you look to the left of the, on the top, the general fund, we got about 47 million in prepayments. And, you know, people do that for tax purposes. And one of the phenomenons of Greenwich, which I've worked in 4 towns, 3 other towns, I've never seen it in June, for example. We've got $63 million in prepayments in June. Usually people want to wait if they're cutting large checks for real estate, or even if it's your car or commercial. It's as I said, in the credit rating agencies, we've got a tremendous collection rate, and it's just, we're great when it comes to cash flow and tax collection, et cetera. But other than that, it's pretty much uneventful, and I'll just open it up if anybody has a question.
Any questions or comments?
I move we accept the treasurer's report.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded by Ms. Tarkington and Ms. Moriarty. Is there any objection to unanimous consent on the treasurer's report? Seeing none, that's 1100. We have no standing committee reports. We have no liaison reports. There are written reports in your package for both CMS and Julian Curtis. I can tell you that,
GSS Festival.
oh, on GHS, I'm sorry. Thank you. I can tell you that I can't disclose anything yet because we haven't signed the GMP on Central, but it continues to look like a very positive variance versus the construction budget. So as soon as we do that, which hopefully will happen next Tuesday, I believe, the project is starting. They're starting to put up the fencing. We had a little glitch with the foundation permit, but that's being worked out this week. But it's getting a little 2 or 3 week delay, but nobody's told me that that's going to make a big difference. So we come to old business. Discussion and possible vote on the following items: amendment of the Greenwich Retirement Board Charter, second read. We've got Mr. Wasek here. If people have some more discussion or questions. Some questions came up at the HR committee about HR policies. So I think, you know, also given Mr. Selp's absence on this, I know he's been interested from his comments the other day at the law committee that, you know, we'll treat this as a second read, but I don't anticipate taking a vote on it this evening. But I'd be interested to hear any comments, concerns, questions, things people want to see. Would anybody like to be recognized for that? Yes, Ms. Moriarty.
Now, just to confirm, you know, one of the pieces of information I think that came up in several committee members that I attended was just to see a draft HR policy, because there's the concern about the follow-through of the intent here and of people, you know, being hired back into different jobs. So what policies is the town going to recommend to put in place to make sure the intent here is followed through? And that's the request before the next meeting.
Yeah, and I think as part of that, I heard maybe from you that, you know, perhaps there ought to be a higher level approval process for those hires.
That's right.
Yeah, so I will communicate that to Mary Pepe. Yeah, Mr. Minarski.
Yeah, listening to your comments, I don't know if you're referring to legal questions or whatever questions is. We have Chairman Michael Wasek here. We normally meet, we try to meet every Monday administratively to handle a number of questions. Michael and I have been working on this for 14, 15 months. We would appreciate it if there are any issues that involve seeking, for example, a legal opinion or whatever, if through you, Mr. Chairman, you can immediately forward your concerns or questions through Michael and myself so that we could be prepared. And I know, when I referenced, we've been working on it a long time, and this is a second read, I don't want to delay it another month. So if there are concerns or questions, Michael and I would, and I'm speaking on behalf of all five of us, and Michael's here if he wants to talk, we would appreciate having those as quick as possible in case we need something like a legal opinion.
Yeah, I don't think from my attendance at committees, but anybody else here can speak up as to anything that, is of a legal or strategic matter applying to this proposal. It's more wanting to fully understand how the HR department is going to do this from a policy and procedure standpoint. But Mr. Harkington?
I'd just like to add, I believe I asked for more information in terms of how many employees we have that are currently in the defined benefit plans that, and perhaps, maybe group by age, it doesn't have to be specific, and the actual retirement age for that group, just to give a better feel for the analytics aspect of it.
Is that information you have, Mr. Wesson?
I mean, you don't need it tonight, just, this is part of the information
Well,
that,
you've talked about it before. At least I've heard it in general terms.
well, I was much more specific.
Turn on the mic.
Oh, hit the button.
Good evening, members of the BET. We, as a matter of course, include in the agenda for each meeting the statistics regarding the plan, and I actually have that close at hand. If you give me a minute, I can actually tell you. I mean, in round numbers, it's 300 people are eligible to retire. It's not exactly 300.
I'd like a breakdown in the way I asked for it, and I'm happy to put.
Who did you ask?
The way I just asked now, but I'll send you an email.
Okay,
Copy, through Harry and whoever, Pete, and you.
So, okay, you would like a breakdown of the number of people eligible to retire and their ages?
Well, I mean, to understand the pool here, and, what I see is that, these employees, basically the ones, most of the unions and MCs were probably hired prior to 2005, and therefore this whole group isn't there. They're an older group. I just think it would be better to word it differently. I'm happy to talk to you offline and share it with the two of you.
Whatever you like, but just in the interest of, since you've raised the general question, I can tell you that we currently have 493 people in the defined benefit plan who are active. There are 1,372 people who are retired and receiving benefits. So of the 493 actives, of non-safety, 230 are eligible to retire now. Of those 230, 80 are over age 65. So they're the ones most at risk, because a lot of people eligible to retire worry about the health care benefit. At 65, they're eligible for Medicare. From the safety unions, there are 75 eligible to retire, of which 30 are already at their maximum benefit. So again, they would be more prone to retire.
Mr. Menarche?
Okay, Mike, if you would hold on gathering the data. The way the process works each year, we do 2 actuarial reports, one for OPEB, one for Retirement Board. There is a snapshot for July 1st, the census data. Roland provides that information, male, female, date of birth, years of service, et cetera. So we're going to so that Michael doesn't reinvent the wheel. We're going to supply that census data, correct? And then the other part is I usually send the financial results, the returns on the investment, et cetera. But we send that to Greg Stump, the actuary, it's as of July 1st of every year. So that Mike Wasik doesn't go out and start working on something, we already have that information.
Yeah, I'm not, we'll talk about this offline.
Mr. Kalb.
First of all, Chairman Wasek, great job at the retirement board. You've been doing a stellar job, and performance has been good, management has been good. So I just wanted to commend you. It's been a pleasure to work with you on that board. Just a couple of quick questions I'm sure that you can answer, because there were some questions from some colleagues. One is, how many years of service before a member of the defined benefit plan can actually retire? What's the minimum number of years?
The plan is very complicated.
Right, so it does it depend on the?
It depends, it depends, yes.
But
But
just
for
give me a rough idea.
for non-safety, a service retirement, which is retirement with full benefits, you have to meet the rule of 80, which is age plus service.
Age plus service, and how many years of service are we talking about? So it's just a total, what's the number?
There's a-
Is it
yeah,
10
there's-
years?
We do vesting here. You could be very young, meaning that relative to the rule of 80, you could have 10 years of service, invest, say you're 40 years old, then you'd have to, let's say you leave the service, you're called a vested terminated employee, and then as you age and you've got that 10 years, which is probably times 2.5 or 2%, whatever, depending at what union you were in and what time you were in. So I'd say the answer is, there's a lot of answers, but I think the easiest answer is a vested term can work 10 years. And then they would have to wait till they reach the rule of 80. Yeah.
The rule of 80, okay.
I mean, that's for a minimum type benefit, for
Right.
term vested. This amendment, which governs what happens when a retiree comes back to work, whether or not they continue to receive their pension benefit while they're working, that only applies to those who qualify for a so-called service retirement. So that's effectively a full retirement, not early retirement, not term vesteds, et cetera.
Got it. And what is the maximum, again, I guess it's the rule of 80, but roughly speaking, if you can explain, the maximum benefit? In other words, when do benefits start maxing out? Because I know that your benefits are growing each year until a certain point when, you've reached the maximum level.
Normally it's 2/3
2/3 of?
your salary. 66%.
66% of your salary, and then that's it.
That's it, yeah.
Except for safety.
Some of them have an extra kicker if they stay longer.
Right, so it's 66% of your salary, and plus, in terms of age, the rule of 80. Is that what we're talking about?
This is ridiculous.
Well, you would, in order to max out, you would have met the rule of 80 requirement, yeah.
Right. And so if you meet the rule of 80, you will max out at 2/3 of your salary? Is that what you're saying, or what?
The amount of the benefit depends on your years of service. What is, it's 2 or 2.5% or 2 1/4, it depends.
There's probably 10 answers to that question. I'll just give you two.
Mr. Kalb, we're getting into some real detail here. Is this?
But it's very complicated, if I could just really quickly. For example, I earn 2.5% up to 20 years, and then it becomes 2% from 20 year on until I reach 66. A fireman, a policeman, public safety is, they call it the cliff, is 26 years, 8 months, but they could have added on. But there's probably 10 answers or 10 variations to answer that question.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Ms. Vasiliotis?
I noted that you said you would be speaking to Mary Pepe about draft HR policies. What is the procedure and how's that going to go forward as far as who's going to review them and questions? And I mean, obviously, it's going to come to this full board, but will it be going to the law committee and to the HR committee?
I should think it would go to the HR committee. I don't know if it needs to go to the law committee.
Well, it was one of the committees that questioned the policies around it. The other concern that I have just is that in the HR committee, we did hear from Ms. Pepe that the reason this search was being done was basically for one person to be hired within the Board of Education in a safety capacity. And we did hear that there was a list of qualified individuals, but they were holding off before filling the position. And I would hope that any policies that were developed would also address that type of issue. So in your conversations with Ms. Pepe, if you could also convey that.
Forgive me, but wouldn't that fall within the Board of Ed?
Well, again, you're holding a position open for somebody that's retired to come back and work. So I don't know how that would work practically in the scheme.
It's the Board of Ed that's holding the position open.
I think these are the kind of details that need to be handled offline.
Harry, can I?
Ms. Aurora, please.
Yeah, well, thank you, Mike, for coming tonight. I wanted to, two questions. One request. At the last BET meeting, during our first read of this, I just summarized, because I'd attended that meeting that you had at the retirement board, I think back in November, where the vote was 4-1 on this amendment. So I just did my best to summarize why you had voted no, and I just kind of taken notes. I think just for the benefit of this board, if you could kind of just summarize, how you voted and why you voted, so we understand kind of, where you came out on this. And then second, there was a question at that board meeting as to what the neighboring towns, how they were addressing this, especially in Westchester and Fairfield counties. Do they have a similar way of approaching this, and I think at that time, we didn't really have that information. I was just wondering if we've gotten any more information on that.
Let me take the second question first about neighboring towns. And again, I don't have that information right at my fingertips, but Ken Bergson and Daniela Barcello did research and determined that it's not unheard of to permit retirees to come back to work and continue to receive their pension benefit, but it's not common. But my recollection was that, it's not, a major community nearby like Stamford that permits it. I don't remember the details, but it's a mix. It's becoming more common. And indeed, as we reviewed this with the IRS expert, or the retirement plan expert, Richard Cohen at Shipman and Goodwin, he said the IRS had, over the course of the last decade or so, amended some of the regulations to permit this because municipalities around the country had expressed the concern that it was becoming more difficult for them to fill key positions in their towns. And so the IRS has enabled this to happen. And this is just anecdotal, but Richard indicated that he believes that this is a trend that will continue. As to the vote, it was 4-1-0 in favor. I don't really understand why my rationale for voting no, I was in the clear minority, is relevant. Mr. Chairman, do you want me to go into this?
No.
I think a lot of us have heard your concerns about, voting no because of a flood of retirements, but a lot of us think otherwise. So.
I'm sorry, the reason I asked that question, Mike, wasn't to put you on the spot. I think as members of the BET, we're being asked to vote on this, and I think it was just important to kind of understand both sides. And I think that's where we were coming from. It wasn't, at least for someone like me, I had no background on this. coming in until I came to that meeting, and it was just kind of investigating. I have your notes, so I know kind of what it was. I was just saying it for the benefit of the public, but it's up to you. If it's not appropriate, that's okay.
I guess you've
Chairman,
spoken to it at other meetings, so maybe just a brief.
Right, okay. I mean, first is I find the idea of double dipping abhorrent. I don't think it's appropriate. Pensions are intended as insurance to provide replacement of retirement income when you're no longer working. But if you're working, then it seems counterintuitive that you would continue to get that effectively insurance payment. That's one thing. Secondly, I anticipate it will cost more. We had the actuary do a sensitivity analysis that indicated that, if it increased retirements, the propensity to retire by 10%, it could have, a not insignificant impact on the town's contribution. And if it doubled the propensity to retire, it could have a major impact. Now, I don't think it's going to double, and I have no idea. We have no way to quantify it. I don't even know whether it would increase it by 10%. But it probably will encourage some people who are eligible to retire, thinking that they'll be able to come back to work. Even if they don't know, they will be eligible. And so I think it'll have some impact. And the other thing is that I am concerned about the ability of the town to police and enforce the different job requirement. So one of the provisions is that you can't retire and then come back in the same job. It's got to be a different job. I think that's complicated, and it will require some careful thinking about what the HR policy is surrounding this. So those collectively led me to vote no. I will point out that my citizen colleague, Pam Frederick, voted yes. And her rationale, she was leaning toward no, but her rationale was because of what happened with the memoranda of understandings related to the collective bargaining agreements that had some problematical language. Because of the outcome of those MOUs, which granted the right to 3 unions, retirees, to get the benefit that the charter amendment was intended to provide, she thought it was unfair that there was a kind of a disparate treatment among the different unions. So she, in the end, said, I think we should treat everybody the same. So she voted yes in the end. So.
Mr. Minarski, I don't know if you want to speak to anything from your perspective on this?
Anisha's question?
I'm sorry?
Do you want me to respond to Anisha's question?
Well, or just in general, where you think as a on the positive side of it.
Just to follow up, again, the vote was 4-1. Mr. Wasik explained himself and Pam Frederick. The other 3 members are myself and 2 members of the defined benefit plan. Reason number 1 is this was brought to us by the first selectman. It had the full support of the police chief, the fire chief, and key personnel at the Board of Education. So it had the full support of a lot of key people in the community. As far as double dipping, I know there's a negative tone to it, but let's say that I leave June 30th. I can come back and double dip just like anybody else can on a limited basis. I understand it's not 35 hours and it's not permanent, but there is a form of double dipping that goes on, and it's extensive in the police force. There's a large number of policemen that come back. I think they're called special officers or whatever. So they were, and don't get me wrong, I wrestled with this, and 2 years ago when it first came up for a different situation, I voted with it was, did Pam vote? It was 3-2 2 years ago. So I was torn in between the two. And I think the main reason, beside it being presented by the first selectman and a key number of public safety, et cetera, is that I didn't want it to stop at the retirement board with 5 people. I wanted the 12 of you to weigh in on it and have your vote heard as far as the matter, okay? So they were the reasons why I voted to move this forward to the BET. It does not have to, there's an exception, it doesn't have to go to the RTM.
Right. Thank you. Any other questions or comments before I make a comment? I would, I've spent a lot of time at the meetings listening to the debate. And, I think that there's some significant benefits to this, particular in public safety. And, I would also point out that, any of these people can retire and go to another town right now. But the potential advantage is that some public safety people retire and take a different job within public safety, and there are two sort of opportunities. One is in dispatch, and the advantage of having someone who knows the town, understands the systems and all of that, doing a dispatch job instead of being out on patrol or whatever role they were in, is I think a huge advantage. And we have trouble today filling those spots. If you go to the HR committee, oftentimes the list of open positions are positions in dispatch. The other thing is that at least one town out there has created a new division of school security, and retirees, that would be a different position. Retirees in the police department could come back and be in a school security. These are the people that are driving around patrolling the schools. And the advantage to the town would be that they would be on straight time instead of overtime. So there's potential salary savings that could be dramatic if the town were to move forward in that fashion, but it can only do so if this passes. So I'm a huge supporter. This should be obvious. And I'll communicate, as I said, with the HR department and make sure that gets reviewed by the committees in February. And we'll try to move forward in February with this. But any other comments, discussion? Yeah, Mr. Alchek.
I just want to say I support this as well, but I do think it's important to make some clarification on the rules regarding when we hire someone, and I support Leslie Moriarty's suggestion earlier that perhaps it should be a higher hurdle. There are different ways, there were different ways to approach this, but I think we should put, some more constraints on, some more restrictions on when we do hire someone, making it sure that people aren't taking advantage of the situation.
Anything else? Thank you, Michael. We appreciate your coming to all of our meetings and all of that.
My pleasure.
You come to a lot. And do a lot with the pension board. Okay, new business. We've got a first read on the annual report.
No.
Did that get put, she was going to put it in the package. I'm sorry, I can't hear.
Just going to send a link.
Oh, okay.
Only thing I need is edits on wording, errors, things like that. The formatting, I'll take care of. Edits, then the printing company also format.
Okay, thank you. Moving to item 12, approval of minutes. We have two sets of minutes that have been gone through with a fine-tooth comb by Ms. Moriarty and myself. And I'd like a motion to approve the November 18th, 2024 minutes, please.
I'll make the motion with one Scrivener's error.
Okay,
Mr. Geiger's name, we continually, in this set of minutes, it's spelt wrong, as it was in the newspaper article where you were referenced. So it's I before E, this time after G, so it's confusing, but that's the only change.
okay, it's been moved by Ms. Moriarty. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Tarkington. To approve the November 18th with the Scrivener's error on Mr. Geiger's name. Is there any objection to approving this unanimously? Seeing none, that's 11-0-0. May I have a motion in regard to the December 12th, 2024 minutes?
I'll move those as well.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded by Ms. Moriarty and Ms. Tarkington. Any objection to unanimous consent? Seeing none, that's also 11-0-0. We get to the end in the chair's report, which I didn't prepare any remarks, so I'm gonna pass on that for now.
Can I just ask the chair a question?
Yes.
If I could, just in regards to next week. We have our budget presentation, obviously.
On
and
Tuesday, that's right.
On Tuesday night, yeah, just for the benefit of the public. I mean, I think most people know, but I've been asked questions, and maybe my colleagues on the dais have been asked as well, just what the process is for signing up to be heard and, you know,
Right.
how you want that to operate. I think it would be important if we don't have clarity tonight exactly how you want it to work and space in the room and all that, that we make the public aware of what the process is at some
Yeah, this
point.
is a budget committee function, so I'm gonna let Ms. Tarkington describe it.
So what happens, Matt and everyone, is the meeting begins at 6 o'clock, and the selectman presents his budget to the budget committee. So the 4 budget committee members are sitting up here on the dais, and Mr. Minarski is generally with us. I hope you're going to be with us on Tuesday evening. And then the public is out there. And the room is set up with many more chairs. The Board of Education and generally the chair, together with the superintendent, present their budget. Again, it's scheduled for 6:30, basically a half hour, but the meeting is continuous. It doesn't, you know, if the first selectman only takes 10 minutes, then it just goes on to the Board of Education. But we basically say 6:30, and then at 7 o'clock begins the public hearing. You know, people, when they come in, they can sign up for, you know, to talk, questions, 3-minute limit. And it's sorted through, and then, you know, generally called in order of how they've signed up. And, you know, it can last, you know, I don't know, 30 people or 40 people or 50 people. Ask questions, 3 minutes each. Mr. Minarski is very strict in terms of timing, cuts them off. And we also, in addition, are adding, but we did it last year too, a form that's linked on from the agenda. So someone can complete, you know, ask a question or make comments as supporting something that they want. And there's a word limit. It basically is the equivalent of a 3-minute word limit that's done. And so it's a formal hearing. You know, minutes are then produced and you know, put online and so forth. And basically, the people who complete the forms, what we've done is we redact their you know, personal information, telephone numbers and email addresses, and then, you know, post those online afterwards so that, you know, just the way the public can hear the meeting, the public can see the comments made. Does that kind of explain it?
Does that answer your question? Yeah. Yep. Gosh, I had a thought. I would encourage all the members to attend because it's very informative. I'll also say that the budget books will be available to us that evening. So if you do attend, you'd be able to pick up a book We'll have to figure out a way to get Mr. Alfano a set of books, but that can be done offline. So we encourage everybody to show up. Anything else?
Well, I should add, though, that this is televised. It's on Channel 25 if you're on Verizon, 79 if you're on Optimum, and also on the GCTV YouTube channel, live.
Right. Mr. Menarski, did you have something? I saw you standing up there for a moment.
I thought she was going to miss the comments. I'll just repeat them slightly. As I get here before 6 o'clock, we spread out over here all the forms. The people come in and I direct them. They have to put their name and then they have, so that they could be called from the dais. And we usually have a backup. So they'll say that Mr. Smith, followed by Mrs. Jones, et cetera. And they have to put the topic in. And it helps us with the minutes subsequent to the meeting. And I don't know if you covered it, but did you say about people that can't attend the meeting that they can ask?
There's
they
a
can make
link on the
comments through a link.
agenda, or, which will be posted on the website.
Correct.
Where they can link in, there's a form that they can complete, and there's like 4 or 5 topics.
Okay.
So basically, it's the same thing with basically a word limit that has been agreed by the IT people, is the equivalent of about a 3-minute comments.
When will that agenda be posted? Is it soon?
should be
hope?
posted
It's already posted? Oh, tomorrow. I just gave people time to fill it out.
Well, and
And I wanted to ask, I don't know if it'll be important this year, but if the cone room is available, it would be good to arrange for backup space just in case we have an overflow crowd. I know for the final public hearing, we have 2 nights, Board of Ed 1 night, schools, and the rest of the issues on a second night, so that should alleviate crowding issues. But we're already starting to get some emails. It might be good to prepare in advance in case there is a crowding issue in this room.
Yeah, and I agree, and quite frankly, I was thinking this afternoon, to alert the police and fire department the way we normally do about the full room thing, so they're prepared for that too.
But we can arrange for the backup.
And we'll work on the backup, whatever room is available. I think that's a good point. Thank you very much.
And just to be clear for the public, this is Tuesday, the 28th, next week, Tuesday, starting at 6 o'clock. Any other thoughts or comments, questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Uh-oh, Mr. Alfano's
I'm
not
sorry?
here. Mr. Alfano's not here. What's going to happen?
Mr.
So
Cow.
moved.
Mr. Cow moves. Do I have a second? Second from Mr. Alcheck.
I actually brought these.
Unanimous consent, 11:00.